Did a lot of thinking about you when I was in Vegas. And I brought back a super film.
Really?
Yes. It's called SST Death Flight.
This time we watched KTM-yay episode 13, SST Death Flight.
Another 70s disaster movie, but this time there's a quarantine too.
Happy Donald Pleasence Day, everybody.
Happy Donald Pleasence Day, everyone.
Okay, we are almost certainly actually going to release this a bit late for Donald Pleasence Day, which is, of course, October 5th, a date that we hold very dear to our hearts here at It's Just a Show. But we're recording this a few days before the happy holiday. Charlotte, do you have an exciting plan for celebrating Donald Pleasence Day?
Oh boy, I mean, it's gonna be a Saturday.
So admission to the Donald Pleasence Museum will be free.
It's so true. And I'm just thinking about all of the things that I can eat while on film so that nobody can cut my scenes.
I'm probably going to celebrate Donald Pleasence Day by editing this episode right now. So
oh my gosh.
I'll be editing you talking about the Donald Pleasence movie that you saw for this episode.
Aww.
But before we get to that excitement, this is exciting.
What's exciting?
There was a mistake in our previous episode.
Oh, I understand. It's exciting because it's my mistake.
Yes, it is. So many people wrote in, and this time it was because you said something incorrect.
It's so true. I say incorrect things all the time.
You were so wrong, Charlotte. You were so very wrong.
In fact, I was.
Tell them what you said.
Well, first, I just want to go on record as saying that I apologize to all of our listeners for incorrectly identifying the actor in the movie The Fog remake from 2005. His name is not Tom Weller. I'm sorry. I'm totally sorry. I totally got that wrong. That was completely on me. His real name is Tom Welling.
There you go.
He is the actor from Smallville. He did play, apparently not Superman. He played Clark Kent pre-Superman, but, you know, there was a Lex Luthor inside of the whole episode and everything. Yes, Tom Welling is his name. Although, in my defense, when I realized I was wrong, I went and I Googled Tom Weller just to see, like, really? I got something like that. That seems so unlike me. And now I know it's totally like me. So there's that. But I Googled him, and if you Google Tom Weller, the second thing that comes up is Tom Welling. So am I really that wrong? I think I am. I totally am. But I can't believe I got it wrong because, like, Tom Welling, even if, I didn't watch so much Smallville, I really did enjoy him in Lucifer. So anyway, I apologize to Tom Welling for getting his name wrong and to listeners for leading you astray. But fortunately, you were not led astray. You knew exactly who this man was.
Well, I can't wait to find out who's going to be wrong this episode.
Ooh, can it be me? Can it be me?
And how many nice letters we're going to get telling us how wrong we are and how shocked they are that we would get something like this wrong. But now let's celebrate Donald Pleasence Day by talking about an episode which he isn't in, SST Death Flight.
This time we watched KTM-yay episode 13, SST Death Flight. Buckle up, everyone, because this is a 70s disaster movie, so there are love triangles, unemployed men, an abortion or marriage subplot, explosions, and pretty much everything you can imagine happening on a plane during a 2 to 3 hour trip. Except snakes or hijackers. So, there is a supersonic plane that is going on its maiden voyage between the U.S. and Paris. It hopes to beat the record flight time because it's super fast. It has the best pilot to fly it, an amazing crew, and none other than Lorne Greene and Burgess Meredith as the bigwigs that designed it, made it, and promoted it. We even have Doug McClure, a representative of a South American airline who might recommend the purchase of these planes for his employer. And There's a bunch of your other favorite stars from the 70s, and they happen to portray passengers that have won a contest to be on this historic flight. I have a feeling we may be talking about them later on this episode. In the last-minute checks before flight, Burgess Meredith's assistant sneaks a corrosive detergent into the hydraulic system to sabotage the plane. We learn later that he is all salty for not being given a promotion, and this starts a cascade of events that lead to this death flight. The hydraulic system leaks all over the place, and the pilot loses control of the plane. It has engines, but it can't level itself out or turn or anything. The sabotager tells the pilot he has to turn around, but the pilot's all like, no way, and the saboteur starts to sweat a lot. He eventually admits to his naughtiness, and the pilot does a bunch of making the passengers move around on the plane to keep it level, while the folks monitoring the flight from the US try to find a solution to the situation. And they think they devised something that could work, but oh no, it causes an explosion. A hole is ripped in the side of the plane, and the oxygen masks fall out, and everyone panics a little bit, but the pilot's able to eventually stabilize the plane at a lower altitude, and there's also a coach-type passenger trying to keep everybody calm throughout, and it mostly works. The ground crews try again, and they find a way to get a little hydraulic pressure to be able to land the plane. So they continue on to Paris. But oh no! There was a super contagious, super deadly virus on board that was released during the explosion. Now the passengers are getting sick, and the doctor who has taken the virus to a lab to find a vaccine and treatment tells the pilot he can't land anywhere without there being good quarantine facilities, because the passengers are of course getting sick already. It's a fast-acting virus. Paris and all of Europe refuse the plane's landing. London's forced to say yes because of a treaty, but the passengers opt to go to Senegal because that's where the virus comes from, and they already have quarantine facilities. So the pilot changes course to Senegal after listening to the passengers' vote. It's kind of a big deal. They run out of fuel and crash just before the real airport in a jungle clearing. Some folks live, some folks die, some folks are still fighting the virus and might die later. It is, in fact, a disaster. But it could have been worse. The end.
Meanwhile, on the Satellite of Love, things were a little different in the KTM-yay era. The format wasn't set in stone yet. This episode, for example, begins with a cold open, or it seems to, based on the surviving tape. Joel and the Bots are singing a song about has-been actors, vaguely to the tune of Bob Marley's Buffalo Soldier, kinda. Anyway, it's weird, but then we get the familiar opening credits, and Dr. Forrester is back from a trip to Vegas, and he won a bunch of money playing Keno, despite doing everything he could to lose. Now he and Dr. Earhart are rich. And he picked up some of that Isaac Asimov body splash for Dr. Earhart, which he'll also do next season in The Corpse Vanishes. After rather more movie than usual, we join Joel as he gives Tom some electrical shocks so that Tom can learn what pain is like. Now, Bots of course can't feel pain, but Joel has figured out how to simulate pain. What the difference is between feeling pain and feeling simulated pain? Well, that's quite a philosophical question you got there. And after some more movie, GPC is talking, and she's talking in a soft Marilyn Monroe voice, and she sings a sexy Marilyn Monroe version of Happy Birthday to Joel in this case. It's kind of cute, but it's also kind of awkward. Well, anyway, turns out it's just Tom Servo doing some ventriloquism. Gotcha! And then it's limbo time? Tom is singing the Banana Boat song that was made famous by Sherry Belafonte's dad, and Joel, Crow, and GPC take turns going under a limbo stick, and they keep doing it, and that's the whole dang sketch. So we end with some letters from viewers. Tom is excited to get a letter from some babes, and then Joel says he'll see us next week, which, okay, yeah, see you next week, Joel. What do you think, sirs? What an episode this is.
What an episode. It's wild.
I had never seen this episode before.
Are you happy you've seen it now?
I am super happy I've seen
Yay!
it now. What about you?
I agree. I enjoyed this one a lot. Although I do have to, small complaint, the movie is so loud and there's so much going on and there's so much like banter between all the people. It was really hard to hear the riffs.
Yes.
I could either hear the riffs or I could hear what was happening in the movie. I couldn't do both. And I think they do a better job of sound leveling later on in future seasons, where it's like, you're going to hear us, even at the expense of the storyline of the movie.
Well, good news. The riffs are not good or interesting. They
Oh.
mostly are just calling out the 9 billion famous people in this movie.
I totally had many, many moments during the movie where I was just like, oh my God, they're doing familiar faces.
Yep. The joy of this movie and the joy of this episode is just getting to see so many random celebrities doing random little bits. And it's like, okay,
Totally.
but not in like a comedy cameo kind of thing, like Angel's Revenge. Like they're
No,
all
it's
in this
true.
throughout. And
Yeah, they have characters. They're not,
yeah.
it's not, look at me, I'm Jack Palance.
I mean, one of the best moments of this episode is John Delancey, Q from Star Trek,
Mm-hmm.
making fun of and harassing Billy Crystal,
Yes, yes.
and then getting stopped by Peter Graves,
No less.
who John Delancey then throws a punch at and knocks out.
Oh my gosh. Because Peter Graves is trying to steal his girlfriend
Yes.
because they have past romance.
Trying to steal John Delancey's girlfriend or his character's
Yes.
girlfriend. Yes. Oh my word. But like, it's that moment of being like, oh yeah, of course, I'm seeing Q stop, Mike Wazowski
Sure.
from and the guy from Biography is there. It's like,
Because
what
why
is
not?
happening?
Oh, and the other flight attendant, it's Ginger from Gilligan's Island.
This movie is so much. We're going to be doing a lot of familiar faces this episode. In fact, most of it is going to be familiar faces, but we're not going to be able to talk about everybody. So
No.
get ready to write in about your favorite one that we missed, but make sure you include something really cool because I do want to hear that. That would be
Oh,
fun.
yes. Yes, please.
Otherwise, though, the riffs were not that great. Some of them were kind of, problematic.
Yeah, sure.
Bit of homophobia, bit of racism, bit of that sort of thing.
Sure, yes.
Worse than the movie, once again, which is not a great look. But, that you could barely make it out, so you didn't have to listen to it, which is weird. Like, I want to recommend this episode to everybody who wants to try a KTM-yay era episode, but
Yeah.
it's not for the riffing. It's just that this is somehow the most interesting way to see this bizarre movie.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what other KTM-yay episode you would recommend above this. Most of the other ones, the movies are so bad that it's really hard for the riffs to kind of balance it out. And in this case, I think they get a couple good, like, zing riffs in. But you're right, we have Lorne Greene inside of this from Bonanza, and then there's one Asian gentleman on board. So, of course, they have to make some sort of a hop sing reference. And it's like, really, guys? No,
Yeah.
no. And so there's just things like that where it's like, I know why you're doing that because of the Bonanza tie-in, but I feel like things like that would have been avoided later on. But it is such a short blip inside of the movie.
I think right now, if I was going to recommend that anybody watch a KTM-yay episode, I'd probably suggest either City on Fire or one of the versions of a movie that they would do again later, maybe Time of the Apes or something. My two favorite episodes are probably this one and Humanoid Woman, just because the movies are so interesting.
It's true.
But-
Humanoid Woman was amazing.
Yeah.
I thought they had really good riffs in that too. You're right. That's definitely a contender for being a really great episode from KTM-yay.
But the riffing in this episode is not much, and the sketches are fine KTM-yay era sketches, I guess,
Sure.
although we do get to hear GPC being voiced by a woman.
I mean, there is a woman's voice behind GPC that you then learn is just Tom being a ventriloquist, so sort of.
Yeah, sort of. But the weird thing is, of course, that when GPC goes back to her regular voice, it's Josh doing it. He's doing Tom Servo and GPC at the same time.
It's true.
Whereas when GPC talks in that Marilyn Monroe voice, it's Faye Burkholder, who was the makeup artist on set, doing it.
Oh, that is pretty nice.
So yeah, we actually get GPC voiced by a woman way before season 11.
And it totally makes sense that they're doing a Marilyn Monroe voice because one of the characters on the plane is kind of a woman with some large breasts who's in a skimpy outfit, who has the big blonde coif, who is also doing kind of a higher register Marilyn Monroe kind of voice. So I think they're trying to pull that in from the movie when they're doing that during their riff.
Yes, but we'll get to that in a moment. In fact, why don't we start talking about some of these familiar faces? Charlotte, you've got your familiar faces jingle now, so let's listen to that and then we'll start talking.
Familiar faces, familiar faces, familiar faces, familiar faces, familiar faces.
So first off, we are doing this for Donald Pleasence Day because once again, someone in this movie starred in a movie with Donald Pleasence. And that's close enough, and I can get Charlotte to watch it once again. So that's going to be fun. Who is our lucky co-star this time around?
Okay, well, I have to say, the intended co-star for being in the movie with Donald Pleasence was Lorne Greene, who everyone knows that I absolutely love because he's from Bonanza, and he's CanCon, so you love him too. So we were looking for a movie that Lorne Greene was in with Donald Pleasence.
Yes.
And what we found was a TV miniseries from the late 70s called The Bastard. And bonus, it also has John Delancey in it. So we ended up with two stars from SST Death Flight who were in another movie with Donald Pleasence.
Yes. Now, we talked a little bit about Lorne Greene when we looked at Johnny at the Fair, the short that he does the narrator for, because he did a lot of voiceover work in Canada before he moved to the States and so forth. He was the voice of Canada as a newsreader for a while and all that excitement.
Oh.
So we've done a little bit of talking about Lorne Greene in general before we look at The Bastard in particular. But is there anything else you want to add about Lorne Greene before we proceed?
I can't think of anything I want to add about Lorne Greene other than, he is in top form in SST Death Flight. I mean, a 70s suit and Lorne Greene, they just go together. It's great.
Yeah, he slips into that role like it's no problem as sort of authoritative man on the ground trying to figure out this problem and save those kids up in that flight. John Delancey, on the other hand, who we haven't really had a chance to talk about, of course, Q from Star Trek Next Generation, as well as a billion other things.
Yes, that is absolutely where I recognize him from, is Star Trek.
Yeah, I mean, Q was always kind of one of my favorites from Star Trek The Next Generation. The Q episodes were always special and fun, and I just enjoyed his campy attitude.
Mm-hmm. I'm so shocked that Q would be a favorite of yours.
Well, what, did you enjoy him on that?
Gosh, yeah.
All right. Don't act like I'm the weirdo.
Oh, I'm not acting like you're the weirdo. I'm just saying, I have no surprise for this statement of yours.
Okay, but here's the thing you might be surprised about, although maybe you're a super fan and you already know this, because I didn't know about this until just now. John Delancey wrote or co-wrote a Star Trek novel.
No, he did not.
And it's called I, Q. I, Q. Get it? Get it?
No, Chris, I don't get it.
Okay, let me explain it to you. No, he's the only Star Trek star who's written a novel or co-written about his character.
What? Really?
Seems weird. What are you waiting for, Shatner?
I know. Seriously. Shatner seems, and Nimoy as well, they both seem like the kind who might actually write, a little novella about their character. Or Geordie LaForge. He's the Reading Rainbow.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I've never been tempted to read a Star Trek novel.
Until now?
But listeners, if one of you writes in and says IQ is actually worth it and has a lot of fun and is, totally in the voice of Q, that really fun voice that's one of my favorite things about the Next Generation, then I might do it and report back to you all.
Oh my gosh, you know how at the end of this episode, Tom says, send us your favorite ice cream flavor, and Joel turns to him and is just like, you might regret that. Chris, I am turning to you. You might regret this request.
Yep, that's the plan. Okay, so Lorne Greene and John Delancey and our beloved Donald Pleasence were all in a movie called The Bastard, which, much like SST Death Flight, was made for TV in the 70s.
And had 100 million familiar faces.
Exactly. This one comes from 1978, which is the year after SST Death Flight.
It's like it was inspired by it. I mean, not at all. No.
Well, maybe. All right. We can't have the entire plot. It's based on a novel by John Jakes, who's like one of those airport novelists, as far as I can tell. Looking at the cover, I knew the genre immediately.
I'll give you the broad overview.
Yeah, just the 2-sentence overview or something.
I'll give you I can't do 2 sentences, but I can do 4. He's a young man who was born in France. He's the bastard child of a lord in England. He gets news that his father is ill, so he and his mother travel to the UK, I guess it would be England, in order to see him. Of course, they're barred entry because there's a legitimate kid. There's, shenanigans. And so they decide to go to the US because they can't access their inheritance. And while he's in the US, he hooks up with the people fighting for independence, and he falls in love, and the movie ends with him relinquishing his title in England so that he can focus on being the person he wants to be in America.
Now, the bastard is played by Donald Pleasence. Please.
I wish. The bastard's played by Andrew Stevens. And the bastard's name is Philippe Charbonneau, but he changes it to Philip Kent once he goes to the UK. MST3K watchers will know Andrew Stevens from Munchie.
He is the awful rich guy that Lonnie Anderson is dating in Munchie.
And he comes back in the second Munchie movie, Munchie Strikes Back, and now he's the awful rich guy boss who's trying to make it with the mom of the other kid that Munchie goes to, who is not the same kid at all. I don't know how long he can play this character. Oh, but he also played it in Murder, She Wrote and Columbo, so, he definitely got to play this rich guy character quite a bit.
Lots and lots of familiar faces in this one. We don't have time to list them all, but name a few favorites.
Okay. Well, first, let's put our 3 main people in there. Lorne Greene is Bishop Francis, who has been encouraged by the lorded aristocracy in England to pay off Philippe Charbonneau and his mom to just leave town and burn the paperwork that lets them know they're a legitimate heir.
Okay.
And so, Philippe Charbonneau, punches the freaking bishop. He has so much anger issues, but Lorne Greene is punched by Andrew Stevens.
Wait. The jerk from Munchie punches Lorne Greene.
I know, right? There are so many levels of wrong here.
It's just like in SST Death Flight when John Delancey punches Peter Graves. It's like, yeah, this is what I'm here for. I want to see actors punch each other that I don't expect to be in the same room.
Maybe you should have watched The Bastard then, because there's a lot of it. Oh. Andrew Stevens and John Delancey get into a fight when Philippe Charbonneau finally gets to America, and he runs into John Delancey, who is a lieutenant with the British officers, and they get into a fight, and he cuts Andrew Stevens cuts John Delancey's face and gives him a scar right across the cheek.
Wow.
I know, right? Bloody and everything.
Oh, man.
I know. And then there's tensions between them for the rest of the movie because, of course, John Delancey has the hots for some babe, and Andrew Stevens just happens to meet her and starts courting her as well. And who could it be but Kim Cattrall?
Oh, my word.
I know. Kim Cattrall is in The Bastard as the love interest of the main character, the love interest of the bastard. Kim Cattrall is the love interest of the bastard.
Well, that's very reasonable. I think Crow would agree.
I mean, I guess. I don't know.
I had assumed just by looking at the cast list that the person who was second listed was the love interest because it's Olivia Hussey.
Oh, but no, she's like the anti-love interest because, of course, there's the legitimate brother who is engaged to a woman, and that's Olivia Hussey. And what does she think? She thinks this little French illegitimate bastard is so handsome. And so she seduces him in the woods and they get it on because there's lots of getting it on inside of the bastard as well.
Oh, right. So the Manor Jay from Quest of the Delta Knights, or if you want, Juliet from Romeo and Juliet, hooks up with the jerk from Munchie in the woods in this movie. This is great. This is good stuff. Okay. Does Andrew Stevens also punch Donald Pleasence?
No. Because Donald Pleasence is the best.
Oh, boy, yeah.
Donald Pleasence plays a printmaker. He prints newspapers inside of England. So while the bastard is in England, before he heads to the Americas, he learns how to press newspapers from Donald Pleasence because he gets rescued by Donald Pleasence's sons on the streets of London and brought inside of Donald Pleasence's household. So he becomes an apprentice printmaker under Donald Pleasence, who is the nicest man, giving him and his mother shelter and food while they're in London. And of course, you know, the bastard says to his mom, like, we can't stay here because we're putting Donald Pleasence in danger, and no one should do that.
Oh, okay. I couldn't help notice on the cast list that there's a couple of famous American founding father types that we get to meet along the way, and they are interestingly cast. One of them we have to mention because of all of the recent controversy. Ben Franklin is played by Tom Bosley.
I know. Can you believe it?
He was supposed to be co-starring in this one-woman show.
Well, I mean, he can do both. Anyway, yes, he plays Ben Franklin, and he gives a letter of introduction to the bastard so that he can apprentice with printmakers in the U.S. once he gets there.
Does he look like Ben Franklin? I don't think of them as
He
looking.
has a Ben Franklin wig, and he puts on the glasses, and he's a little portly, which is pretty much all you need to be Ben Franklin. And there's also a scene where he's naked.
Oh.
Like, okay, so you don't see him naked, but it's clear that he is sitting on a chair naked, and he has all the windows in his room open because apparently Ben Franklin takes an air bath for an hour every day for his constitution. So he has all the windows open and he's sitting naked on a chaise, and the bastard walks in and is just like, oh, I'm sorry, am I interrupting something? And it's like, oh my God, I hope you are, and you leave this room because we don't need to see anything further.
That is a true thing that Ben Franklin did. So this sounds very historically accurate to me.
I hope he did not accept visitors during such a time.
I mean, he was an absolute freak, so why not?
Mm-hmm.
And I also see here that they picked someone interesting to play Paul Revere.
William Shatner. Hello.
Sure, why not?
And he's great. He's great. I mean, as only William Shatner can be for Paul Revere. He is very him. He's very Paul Revere. He is very William Shatner. He is very 1978. There's no question about it. And I felt like, okay, I'm watching The Bastard, but I'm also doing this because we just watched a movie about a death flight on a plane. So it totally makes sense that William Shatner would be in this, you know, because of his Twilight Zone episode. They mentioned it more than once in the riffs.
Yeah. Well, okay. So it's a big 70s made-for-TV movie with lots and lots of your favorite stars in it, and the great Donald Pleasence, and the great Lorne Greene, and the also pretty great John Delancey,
It's
as
true.
well as others. How was it? Would you recommend people track it down on YouTube and watch it?
No.
Oh. Oh,
I
no.
mean, I was watching it for Lorne Greene. He was out in like 20 minutes. Punched in the face, left the scene. That was it. I was watching it for Donald Pleasence. He was out in like 45 minutes. Helped out a friend, hooked him up with Ben Franklin, sent him on a ship to the Americas. Like, there was no interactions between John Delancey and Donald Pleasence. There was no connection between Lorne Greene and Donald Pleasence. They weren't even in scenes together. So if you're watching it for Donald Pleasence, like, maybe just skipped forward to the parts with Donald Pleasence. He's delightful.
That's fair. Just like the Malta movie that I watched. when we did Final Justice.
Yes.
Well, you've sort of buried the lead here because, of course, The Bastard famously was adapted for the screen by, amongst other people, a guy named Guerdon Trueblood or Guerdon Trueblood. I'm not sure how he pronounces it, but that's fine. One of the other scripts that he worked on was for a made-for-TV movie called SST Death Flight the year prior.
It. Man, I went through the list of all the actors looking for a connection. I never even thought there'd be a connection between any of the people who are working behind the scenes. That's hilarious. Who would Donald Pleasence have been in SST Death Flight? Oh, man.
The plane.
Obviously. You're totally right. Familiar faces, familiar faces, familiar faces, familiar faces, familiar faces.
There's another interesting combo of familiar faces on this. We could talk about a few faces who are connected to TV shows of the 70s and homosexuality.
Oh.
Now, we get a little nod to homosexuality in this film because one of the flight attendants is played by Billy Crystal and presents as gay and gets made fun of by John Delancey for that.
I don't think they make it over the top, though. You know what I mean?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, they don't make it over the top. Absolutely. They could have gone far further with that,
mm-hmm.
especially given the time and place. But it's interesting because Billy Crystal spent a lot of his career in this time period when he was first starting out playing gay roles, or let's say gay adjacent roles, most notably in the TV show Soap, which we have talked about on this program before because Adam and I were both big fans of Soap. And you've seen Soap, right?
I've seen several episodes of Soap. I don't think that I am as big of a fan of it as you and Adam were, but I did enjoy the episodes that I saw, for sure.
Yeah, and of course Billy Crystal plays Jody, who I think is the first gay character in a TV, like a primetime TV show, a regular occurring one, etc., part of the main cast. So like historic moment. Soap was a very controversial boundary pushing show, which was trying to do all sorts of things and got into a lot of trouble on both sides. People were worried about the presentation of a gay character. Gay people were worried that maybe it would be presented poorly.
Mm-hmm.
There's a really interesting video by a guy named Matt Baum, who does a lot of wonderful videos about gay people in TV and film.
Mm-hmm.
He put out a book recently about gay people in television and the history of that called Hi Honey, I'm Homo, which is a delight. I recommend it. I recommend
Great
the video.
title.
I recommend the video on Soap. But I know that when Billy Crystal took that role, he was worried a little bit about being typecast, right? Like, if I'm playing a gay character on TV so prominently, people are going to assume that of me. It might limit my career possibilities going forward.
Which is astonishing to me because when I think of Billy Crystal roles, like one of the first one that comes to mind is When Harry Met Sally. And he's kind of like a very masculine character inside of that and like just a bad guy, you know?
Yeah.
Just in his treatment of women, in his ability to form relationships with women, right? Like it's a very interesting role. I enjoy the movie very much and I enjoy his presentation of the role. But that's the one that comes to mind for me. But of course he hadn't been in that yet, you know, in the late 70s.
Yeah, no, he's still starting out and he's got a wife and a kid and he's trying to, you know, come up with a stable income, and a TV show is a good idea. And he also thought, hey, this could be a chance to do some good work.
Yeah.
Like, he pushed for a better, more fleshed out, less stereotyped character. Some of the very early episodes have Jody being very stereotyped, and it's not great. But they got into a much better place after a little while. And it's interesting that he kept taking these roles, like in SST Death Flight, right? Where he was playing this flight attendant. And also in the first movie that he did after SST Death Flight in 1978, when he still would have been on Soap, which is called Rabbit Test.
Oh, I've never heard of that movie. I don't know what it's about.
He plays a man who gets pregnant.
Oh, it's Junior with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Emma Thompson, but like 15 years earlier?
Yep, and directed by Joan Rivers.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how I feel about that.
Yep, and now we're going to talk about it because I watched it, because I did a little blue sky message to Matt Baum talking about the other person we're going to talk about in a minute. And I mentioned what we were doing. And he was like, you know about Rabbit Test, right? And I was like, oh no, I have to watch this, I guess. Oh my.
All right, tell me, Chris.
It has a lot of people in it, right? It is once again a show with a billion different peoples. Billy's mom is played by Doris Roberts. You know, the mom from Everybody Loves Raymond.
No. What? That's amazing.
All sorts of random people show up. Tom Poston from the Newhart show, you know the guy. You know him if you saw him. He plays a priest who gives a mass in Pig Latin. That's pretty funny. That's a pretty funny joke.
I'm all right with that one.
Hold on to all the funny jokes because they're in short supply.
Ooh.
Imogene Coca is in it. Roddy McDowell is in it in 2 different roles.
What?
Paul Lynde is in it. Peter Marshall is in it as himself.
What?
As the host of the Hollywood Squares, which is now canceled once the news breaks out that a man has in fact gotten pregnant. They simply don't have all the money and toasters that they would need to give to all the contestants who they had apparently gotten that question wrong about.
Oh my gosh. What? This is amazing. This movie sounds amazing.
It's also the very first movie appearance of Michael Keaton.
No, it isn't. Really?
He doesn't get a line, but he's playing an extra sailor that you get to see for a few seconds.
All right.
Charlotte Ray's in it somewhere. That's kind of fun.
I love her.
Jimmy J.J. Walker is in it in an excruciating sequence where he is playing a entertainer in Africa. Once word gets out that Billy Crystal is pregnant, it becomes a sensation, and he does a world trip. And he meets the Queen, who is played by Charles Pierce, who is a female impressionist of the 70s, who plays the Queen of England. That's fun. That's fine.
Sure.
He does a few other things that are increasingly more and more racist. And then he gets to Africa, where...
You just need to stop the movie right there, right? This is not going to go well.
Well, I'm going to leave out a few things that do not go well, but I will say Jimmy J.J. Walker does a ventriloquist routine with Billy Barty on his, knee as the ventriloquist dummy, who, of course, can do his own voice. And Billy Barty is in vaudeville blackface.
Oh my gosh.
The movie is just as you would expect from a movie that was co-written and directed by Joan Rivers.
Uh-huh.
Really racist.
Yeah.
And in that particular way, right? In that very specific way. So that's unpleasant. And also, it's not funny. Like, it's, for the most part, there's a few little good jokes here and there, but like 95% of the movie is desperately unfunny.
Do you think it would have been considered more funny in the time that it was released? Or is this like a matter of it aged poorly? Or is this a matter of it wasn't even funny then?
Roger Ebert's review of it at the time said that's what makes the movie quietly amazing, that so many different gags could not be funny.
Does he mean amazing good, or does he mean amazing awful?
Shocking. Like, it's really a tour de force. It's also just like the film is ugly. The cinematographer was like somebody interesting, but just did not put in any effort on this film. There's no thought. There's just like, well, we're going to film these famous people who are funny, and we're just going to assume something good is going to happen, and we're not going to do any coverage. And it's terrible. It's just terrible.
I mean, whatever. Movies are still trying to do that to this day. Like, let's not write a funny script. Let's just put funny people together and see what happens.
Exactly. Another fun thing is that Mike Post did the music, the guy who did all the 80s TV theme songs.
Nice.
And
so there's little silver spoons going on all over the place.
It's such a Mike. As soon as I saw that, I was like, oh yeah, that explains everything about how weird the music is. Because it's all this like triumphant synth music. Like, it's like, what is this? What does that do with anything?
Oh my gosh. It sounds like I got the better watch with The Bastard.
Here's the thing. I didn't hate watching it. I kind of enjoyed it partially because it had a lot of famous people doing weird things.
Sure.
And partially because it's like, what the hell was that? What did I just watch? There was a lot of that. But it wasn't good. And in no way do I recommend anybody watch it, especially if they don't know what they're getting into. And like, if you're really into the thought of young Billy Crystal being pregnant, like, he doesn't look that pregnant even when he's about to burst,
Oh, God, some people have all the luck.
The other gay TV guy we got to talk about is Robert Reed, your captain, Jim Walsh.
Not not because he plays a character who's gay in the movie, but because of his personal life?
Yeah, because he was gay.
All right.
He, of course, was the dad on The Brady Bunch, Mike Brady, which had ended in 1974, several years before SST Death Flight.
But it's important to note that he has kept that perm going for the entire rest of the 70s. His hair is a fabulous perm. I love it.
Did you know that Sherwood Schwartz, the guy who made The Brady Bunch and a bunch of your other favorite 70s, 60s TV shows, do you know who he originally wanted to play Mike Brady? Who he was pushing for the execs to get to play Mike Brady?
No. Who?
Gene Hackman.
Stop. No. Lex Luthor?
Amongst other things, yeah. And like that would have been good because Gene Hackman is, of course, good in everything. But the execs said no.
He's a little too gruff, you know?
That wasn't the problem the execs had.
Oh, what problem did they have?
Well, they wanted to go with somebody that people had heard of.
Gosh, this is like, you know how I can't believe it. What?
Yep.
I feel like I've known Gene Hackman since birth, but
well,
sometimes
this was before you were born.
I guess it's true. It's true. All right, so Gene Hackman was an unknown. What was Robert Reed known for at the time before the Brady Bunch?
He was in a bunch of shows, including an early 60s show called The Defenders, where he made his name. He also was a trained Shakespearean actor who absolutely hated the Brady Bunch.
Oh, he was great in it, though.
Sure.
He was such a good dad in the Brady Bunch.
Well, that seems to be the case. And he also seems to have been like a good dad figure to the kids on the set, like to the actors.
Oh, that's even better.
Yeah, so that's super nice. But he hated the show scripts. He hated how like tacky and cheesy and gag-a-second the scripts were. And he would write these like epically long memos filled with theories of comedy and verisimilitude and why the Brady Bunch just was nothing. Like there was nothing there. It was just nothing. And he hated it and he pushed for it to be better, that it could be something you could at least a little bit act in and be proud of.
Oh my gosh, I feel so bad because I'm going to tell you right now, I have seen Robert Reed in so many Brady Bunch episodes and I adore him, and I haven't seen him in anything Shakespearean, not once. This poor man has a career that he is super proud of, and I haven't seen any of the parts he's proud of. I feel so bad.
Yeah, basically.
So was there controversy because of his personal life and being the dad in the Brady Bunch?
Well, there would have been if people knew about it.
Oh.
So Reed had been married briefly in the late 50s and he had a kid, but, you know, he was a closeted man. Although, like, it seems like all the actors knew that. Florence Henderson knew. You're going to tell Florence, obviously.
Well, yeah, I would.
And I think the kids also knew, or at least the older ones or something like that. But he didn't want it to be out there because, you know, it would ruin his reputation and his ability to get work in films like SST Death Flight.
You don't want to close that door if you don't have to.
And he died in 1992 without having come out publicly of colon cancer complicated by being HIV positive. So, like, he was outed after he passed.
It's a shame that he never felt comfortable enough to share his life, but it is also okay that he decided to keep his personal life to himself. I think that's got to be a really hard line for actors to walk in general. And then when you have something in your personal life that could keep you from getting work, how do you share that? How do you comfortably share that?
Yeah.
Oh, what a horrible conundrum to be in.
Hey everybody, it's time for
Familiar faces, familiar faces, familiar faces, familiar faces, familiar faces. Ooh, it's time for the Shallow 13. 13 independent disasters averted to save today's episode. SST Death Flight. Go, Chris, go.
Some of the familiar faces in SST Death Flight are very familiar indeed, and we've either talked about them before, or we will have an opportunity to talk about them in the future. Like, for example, Peter Graves, who plays successful business guy Paul Whitley, who used to date the woman that John Delancey is dating at the beginning of the film.
We talked about Peter Graves in our episode on It Conquered the World. And of course, he also appeared in Attack of the Eye Creatures, Parts, The Clonus Horror, and Beginning of the End, which we haven't covered yet.
But That's the episode where Crow writes the screenplay for a biopic about his life, so we'll probably talk more about him then. So,
yeah. Also, Doug McClure is here as Hank Fairbanks, an ex-pilot who's willing to go rogue if it means saving a guy's life.
Doug McClure starred in 2 movies from season 11, At the Earth's Core, which we've covered, and The Land That Time Forgot, which we haven't done yet. So we got to save the few fun facts we might have about Doug McClure for when we do that one.
Burgess Meredith is back as Willie Bassett, an old guy who's mighty proud of the plane he built. Burgess is most famous for playing the Penguin on the Adam West Batman and for being Rocky's trainer in the Rocky movies. Oh, and he's in Clash of the Titans!
And he's in another KTM-yay era episode, The Last Chase, which we have covered, so I guess this might be our last chance to say anything more about Burgess. Or just say the name Burgess. Burgess.
Burgess! Fun! Burgess! Turns out that was his middle name. Technically, he's Oliver Burgess Meredith, but he was right to go by Burgess. Burgess.
Robert Ito plays the flight engineer, Roy Nakamura, and if you, like my grandmother, were a big fan of Quincy M.E., then you might recognize him from that show. He also did a voice in an episode of Avatar: The Last Airbender, the one with the dragon dance, so...
But he's also in Women of the Prehistoric Planet, Rift in Season 1, which we haven't done yet. We'll try to remember to keep an eye out for him.
Oh wait, we totally forgot to mention that Robert Reed was in Bloodlust from Season 6. Robert Reed was in Bloodlust from Season 6. Another episode we haven't done yet. This right here is episode 162. How are there so many more left to do?
A few of the other random passengers also show up in other Misted movies, but you don't really want us to list all of them, right?
Oh, but we will mention that the music is by John Kakavas, who also did 2 other KTM-yay era episodes, Superdome, which we haven't done yet, and Hangar 18. And we mentioned in our Hangar 18 episode that Kakavas did the music for Canada's Hinterland's Who's Who. And we'll probably mention it again when we do Superdome.
And that's time. Familiar faces, familiar faces, familiar faces, familiar faces, familiar faces. It's astonishing how many familiar faces are inside of here. How would we even be able to do all of them? It would be like a 4-hour show just about familiar faces.
Well, we're not going to do all of them, but we're going to do a few more.
Ooh, okay.
And the one I want to start off with first is Burt Convy.
His character's the worst.
Yeah, he's playing Tim Vernon, who wants his girlfriend to get an abortion already.
Well, I mean, it's because she's, like, hot, and he doesn't want her to, like, ruin her body. God, he's, like, the worst, Chris.
Was Burt Convy a familiar face to you? Did you watch a lot of game shows growing up like I did?
I did watch a lot of game shows growing up, but his face was still not familiar to me. The hosts are just not my favorite, I guess. I don't know.
Well, he was the host of a few shows like Tattletales and Win, Lose, or Draw and Super Password with Betty White, ideally, as one of the contestants.
Well, see, I would recognize Betty White.
Well, I grew up with Burt Convy. I knew of him as a game show host. I did not know the rest of his career. I didn't even realize he had been an actor, so I was completely surprised to see him here. But let me tell you, Burt Convy has had a much more interesting career than I realized.
Oh, what would I know him from, do you think?
Well, let me go a little bit more biographically, because he started off playing the sports.
Oh, playing the sport. Well, you know how I love the sportsing.
Exactly. When he was young, when he was a teenager, he was picked up to be in like the Phillies minor league system. I don't think he ever played in the majors, but like he did play for a few different teams, including the Klamath Falls Gems.
Oh, good work. Klamath Falls is so exotic.
Which Klamath Falls is a relatively small town in Oregon, but like...
Has no falls, everyone.
Nope.
Just FYI, don't drive there looking for falls. I did. I was sorely disappointed.
Yeah. But then, you know, he decided to get into acting instead, basically, and he did a lot of like live theater acting.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. He was in the original cast of Fiddler on the Roof.
What?
And Cabaret, amongst other things. And like, not like the smallest roles. He had actual roles in them.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
And then he started doing movie acting, and he was in Roger Corman's Bucket of Blood.
Wow. Wow. Was he good enough that he never had to be in another Roger Corman movie again?
That's a great question. I don't remember the answer to that question. I'm sure we'll get a letter. That'll be fun.
Excellent. That'll be the best letter.
Wait. I forgot. I went all out of order. In the 1950s, he was briefly part of a vocal group called The Cheers that had a top 10 hit in the U.S. with a song called Black Denim Trousers and Motorcycle Boots.
No. Stop it.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. Was he a T-Bird? Is he in Greece? He should be in Greece.
He should have been. Would have been amazing.
Seriously.
Like, there's so much here. The only other thing I want to say, like, then he got into game shows and he did the stuff that I know him best for.
Sure.
He formed a production company in the 80s with Burt Reynolds
Oh my gosh.
called Burt and Burt Productions. B-E-R-T Convy and B-U-R-T Reynolds.
Oh my gosh.
And they made the game show Win, Lose, or Draw, which, like, yay. It's so happy.
Absolutely. Good for the two of them.
This was a rabbit hole that delighted me at every moment to go
I'm so
down.
glad.
Speaking of interesting people, Brock Peters plays Dr. Ralph Thurman, who wants to get a virus to Paris. Things go a little poorly with that plan.
Just because you infect all the passengers and have to, like, take them to Senegal, it doesn't mean everything went... Yeah, it was really bad.
So, yeah, Joel and the bots do a pretty good job of doing familiar faces riffs throughout this and telling us who everyone is. They say about Brock Peters that he was in Shaft.
Yeah, that was not their finest moment.
He wasn't in Shaft. He was in To Kill a Mockingbird, as the guy being defended by Atticus Finch.
Oh my gosh!
And he was in Soylent Green.
What? He was in Soylent Green?
You remember the end of Soylent Green? Spoilers, I guess, for the end of Soylent Green. We'll put up the spoiler sound quick. Okay, great. So you know how Soylent Green is made out of people.
I do.
And you know how Charlton Heston says, you gotta tell him. You gotta tell him.
Yeah.
Tell everybody.
Yeah.
He's saying that to Brock Peters, his boss at the police chief.
All right, but here's the thing. Like, in the riffs for SST Deathflight, they do make a couple of Soylent Green references. So maybe the Shaft thing was just a stupid joke, and they knew who Brock Peters was.
Yep, but that doesn't make it much
No,
better.
it doesn't make it a better joke, but it just means that, like, okay, they are not completely without any context as to who this person was. That was just a bad joke. Which at the time that they said it, I'm like, I bet that guy wasn't even in Shaft. You got to be kidding me, guys. You got better work than this coming. Anyway, I'm glad he was in Soylent Green. Like, I have to admit, Burgess Meredith is the kind of guy who always plays these, like, grumpy old men trainer types. And in my mind, it was like, oh my God, Burgess Meredith is in Amazing Things. And I knew he was Rockery's trainer. And I'm just like, God, isn't he also Popeye's dad? No, he's not Popeye's dad. Isn't he the guy from Soylent Green, the grumpy old man who is like Charlton Heston's mentor? And I'm like, no, he's not. But they still made a Soylent Green reference. So I knew there was a Soylent Green connection somewhere. I'm so glad you made that one for me.
Yes.
Because
Edward G.
it
Robinson
wasn't through
and
Burgess Meredith.
are different.
Yes, totally.
Yeah, so we've also got Misty Rowe playing Miss SST, Angela Garland, the one with the blonde hair and the high-pitched voice.
Yes, and the slight lisp, because hot ladies lisp.
Yeah. Did she look at all familiar to you?
She did not look familiar to me. She's awful pretty, though.
She is awful pretty. There's two things that you might know her. I mean, she's been in a bunch of stuff, but there's two things you might know her from. One of which was, I don't remember. I know we've talked about this, and I've already forgotten, and I assume our listeners have too, though who knows. Whether you grew up watching Hee Haw at all.
Yes, but I haven't watched Hee Haw since I was under 10.
Fair. Neither have I, except when I watch clips to remind myself of things for the show.
Sure, yes.
She was one of the quote-unquote honeys on Hee Haw, the pretty ladies who helped out in the sketches sometimes.
Oh, okay.
So that's one of the ways you might know Misty Rowe. The other way you might know her is because she played Marilyn Monroe in 2 movies.
Oh, which ones?
Goodbye Norma Jean from 1976 and Goodnight Sweet Marilyn in 1986. So when GPC sings the Marilyn Monroe Happy Birthday song, it's not just because Marilyn Monroe just looks a bit like
or
it.
is doing the bit of Marilyn Monroe, yeah.
Yeah, or is doing her voice like that. It's because, she's actually played her before.
Oh.
One of the other interesting people who shows up, but only for a hot second, is Regis Philbin is here, everybody.
That was the weird, I mean, there's so many weird, like, what? How did that person get in this movie? But Regis Philbin was totally one of the big, like, what? What is Regis Philbin doing in this movie? Also, he looks so young. I forget he was ever young. I feel so bad.
I mean, yeah, but he doesn't look that young.
He looks younger than he did when he was doing Regis and Kathy Lee. Or Regis and Kelly.
Well, Regis and Kathy Lee hadn't started yet, of course, but he had been on plenty of shows and like talk shows and always in that like facilitator role, it feels like, which is sort of what he does in the morning show. That's what he's trained at. He's just a machine that facilitates TV shows going from one segment to the next.
Well, he does it well. He obviously has been steeped in it his whole life.
Like Burt Convy, he also took a turn as a game show host when he hosted Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, which is well after I stopped watching game shows, I guess. It was there during that period where I didn't even have a TV. But I don't know, did you watch it much? Do you think he was a good game show host?
I watched a little bit of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. I mean, like, Meredith What's-Her-Toes was the host there for a while as well, but Regis was a good host. I always enjoy the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire in the early things. You know, the first questions are usually so easy.
And people get them wrong.
I know, they do. Well, it's because you get overconfident and you get nervous, right? Like, I've done that. I mean, who thought it was Tom Weller, everyone? It was me.
Lost the $1 million on that one.
I mean, seriously, I was off the show so fast. But one of the questions was that I always remember because it's one of my favorite like screenshots is the like, what amount of diggity is there? And you know, it's like just a little of diggity, maybe a little more. And like, of course, it's no diggity. And it's just like, oh my God, every time I see that, I just laugh. It's my favorite of all the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire questions.
Was that a real thing or was that just a meme?
I don't know. I've only seen the screenshot, but I really hope it was real. I mean...
Hold on. I've got an answer now.
You're fact-checking whether it was an actual real Who Wants to Be a Millionaire question? Ooh!
It was a real question.
I freaking love it.
Huh. Thank you, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire fan wiki.
Fan wikis are the best.
They are. They absolutely are. Well, you know, that's not the only game show that Regis was the host of, because for a very brief period of time, for about a year in 2008, he hosted a revival of Password.
You love Password.
Well, I enjoyed it when Burt Convy was the host.
Oh, not so much with Regis?
How are there two Password hosts in this movie? I never saw the Regis one. I don't know. He's probably fine. It probably goes from one clue to the next very smoothly.
If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if we missed your favorite familiar face, or if you'd like to ask us anything, get in touch with us. Our email is info@itsjustashow.com, and we would love to hear from you. This show is made possible by listeners like you, and like our randomly selected supporter, Tony. Thank you, Tony. For as little as $1 an episode, you too can be like Tony and help us research and record this show. You can join us in a friendly Discord, and you can listen to all of our Superfan bonus bits. Find out more at itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And if you want to follow up on anything that was mentioned today, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/162. Well, Chris, will our parade of familiar faces continue? Will we watch another star-studded extravaganza from the 70s?
No, we're not gonna. No, I don't think there'll be too many people that you recognize in our next episode, which will be Season 6, Episode 6, The Creeping Terror.
Ooh.
But until next time...
This news reporter will self-destruct in 5 seconds.
All the actors form 2 lines, Love Boat on the left, Fantasy Island on the right. Take it away, Theme Squad.
Punched in the face, left the scene, that was it.